Welcome, folks. Wonderful folks. Welcome back. It is Monday, Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 166, and we have been waiting to do this for a while. Thank you for joining us. It is no doubt a fact that there are many versions of inclusiveness in all the societies that we have around the world. Now, part of that inclusiveness includes people from neurodiverse and differability aspects of life, right? So what we want to do is talk to two important people to us, and I know two important people to everybody in the intercultural world that can tell us from personal experience about how that inclusiveness looks in different cultures, in our own culture, and how we could probably even define those terms a little bit more. So stick around. It's going to be great. Thanks very much. Welcome back.
G'day, mate.
Oh, g'day. How are you
doing?
I'm doing. Welcome to the show, the only daily show of the business of culture and the culture of business. Two Chaps, Many Cultures. We are the Two Chaps. That's a good start, but it's not everything, especially not everything today. How are you today, pal?
I'm splendid. Or as the guy that I met this morning as I was walking my dog in my neighborhood, I asked, hey, how you doing? He says, I'm doing super fantastic. I said, all right, that'll be the motto for the entire week now. We're doing super fantastic. And
super fantastic.
Folks, we want to know how you're doing, and let us know how you're doing, where you're doing it, and where in the world you're watching this, because Two Chaps, Many Cultures, and as Brett said, the number one show with Two Chaps and Many Cultures. So today, on this marvelous Monday, we're going to talk about how we can be diverse and inclusive, not simply around cultures as people might define them in their little boxes of nationalities or sub-nationalities or whatever box you want to create for yourself. There's a level of diversity that in most societies isn't really talked about enough, I think, and maybe not talked about it in a way that would actually lead to more inclusiveness. And that is that of neurodiversity and people of different levels of abilities. And we have two wonderful guests here today who can talk with, I would say, some level of authority on that topic, right?
Absolutely.
Let's bring them in.
We don't have a lot of authority in a lot of topics, and we need people like this. Welcome to the wonderful Basma.
Welcome, Valli. Welcome, Basma. And we're going to move you around on our little shuffleboard deck here. So it's two chaps above each other and the two wonderful guests in a separate half of the screen. Ooh, this is new. We've never had two guests at the same time. I don't know if I can handle this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is our first time having two guests. And
this is so exciting.
Well, it's exciting for us. Well, we know the wonderful Basma and the wonderful Valli because we've known them for a lot of years. We've learned from them. We've stood at the altar of their knowledge. Let's put it that way. That is the only best way to even think about when we talk about these two wonderful ladies in the intercultural field. But there is another aspect that they bring, and they're presented at many different events and seminars and conferences around, and that is on the area of neurodiversity, etc. And we're not going to steal any of that thunder because we have the experts. Welcome, ladies. It's an honor to have you here, as always. And we would like to know, whoever wants to go first, little introduction and about what, why you're talking about this particular topic today for those who might be living under a rock and don't know you.
Do you want to go first, Valli?
Okay. So first of all, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm honored to be sharing the stage with with you guys, and certainly with my dear friend Basma. We are kindred spirits. My name is Valli Murphy. I am a cross-cultural trainer, facilitator, consultant. I work with global teams. I'm an executive coach. I'm passionate about facilitating people's growth to excellence. And I'm also the parent of 3 amazing children, and one of them happens to be neurodiverse. And that's what I'd like to talk about today, and the culture of neurodiversity.
Now, since you brought into this conversation this terminology, not everybody might be familiar with that terminology, neurodiverse. Can you define it for us real quick, or for those of us who are still under the rock?
It's a more person-centered way of identifying someone who has a disability. And actually, Basma and I think in our personal lives, try to eschew that expression, disability. We like to say differability. Mm-hmm. So it's someone who has a neurocognitive or a developmental delay. I mean, there's more to it. And I think Basma could add to that definition.
All right. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Well, Basma, then let's see how we can give you the mic and also make your screen bigger. There we go.
I'm growing. Yeah, so I'm Basma Ibrahim DeVries. My full-time gig is that I'm a professor of communication studies. And I also do intercultural training and consulting on the side. And I'm here today, so happy to be here with my dear friend Valli. We don't get to see each other much in the real world, but definitely virtually, it's great to connect. And I'm here because, you know, my whole professional career, I've been working in the field of intercultural communication. And when my first son was born, who into the social media world, he's known as Mr. Sunshine. And that actually comes from his name in utero was, we didn't know if he was a boy or a girl, and his name in utero was 𝙏𝙬𝙤, which in Arabic means my sunshine. And he definitely, when he came into the world, lives up to that. Not every day, but that's a huge misconception of people with Down syndrome, is that they're just happy and easygoing all the time. That is actually not true. They have the full range of emotions that the rest of us have. But when Jacob was born, I realized that, you know, my whole life I'd been doing all this intercultural training and inclusion work. And I realized that me as a trainer and also the field in general did not pay enough attention to this particular aspect of diversity. And even though we all try to, you know, be sensitive to differabilities in our trainings, you know, I always tell people when I'm training trainers, every time you walk into a training room or a classroom, you have to assume that somebody in the room is having hearing challenges or visual challenges or learning challenges, or, you know, is emotionally disengaged, or, you know, that all these things might be going on. But I don't think we've made it center stage much. I don't think a lot of us have learned all the strategies to really, truly be inclusive. And so I obviously, having my own kid and wanting the world to be as open to him as possible, I have definitely made that a more central part of my work.
Lovely. Thank you for clarifying this. Now, I come to this conversation with very little knowledge and very humble mindset, because I'm here to find out what I may have been missing, or what are some of the awarenesses that, no matter whether we are in our industry, being the cross-cultural field, or the teaching world, so to say, or in any other professional environment, what are some of the awarenesses that you have experienced as missing in the professional world when it comes to dealing with people with neurodiverse abilities? What should we pay more attention to?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I was just going to start with something, Valli, that we talk about a lot together, which is the visibility invisibility piece. And that, you know, one of the first things Valli and I when we had one of those heart-to-heart talks one night late at a conference, one of the things that kind of came out for us was the different, the really incredible similarities in much of our lived experience as mothers and interculturalists working in this field, and mothers of people with a differability, but also the significant difference, which is that my son has Down syndrome, and he has some visible features that most people notice that he has Down syndrome. And the thing about that extra little chromosome, and by the way, I'm going to do, I didn't pre-plan this, I promise, a little shout out to March 21st coming up is World Down Syndrome Day. I don't know if everyone knows this,
I didn't.
but 3/21, March 21st, and this is of course the US American way of writing dates, right? We were many parts of the world be 21/3, but 3/21 is the third copy of the 21st chromosome, which is what Down syndrome is, and it is the most common chromosomal difference. And it is a day to celebrate all the people in the world with Down syndrome. And that extra chromosome affects every system of the body. And so there's often a speech delay, there's often gross motor movement delays, fine motor movement delays. And so it's noticeable. I go about the world with my kid, and that's one of the things that really was really eye-opening for me as somebody who much of my life has lived as a person in the dominant culture, where I pass as a member of the dominant culture. Suddenly now I had a child, and we were the other, like we were noticeable now. And that led to a lot of new insights for me, a lot of new experiences moving about in the world, kind of being still obviously part of the dominant culture here in the US, but also being a little more noticed. And that's very different than Valli's experience with her son, in which his differability is not visible. And so that creates a whole new set of both opportunities and challenges that maybe, Valli, you want to speak.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for highlighting that. And in fact, the challenge with having an invisible disability is that, the person that's dealing with my son is going to just sort of engage with him in a way that, you're used to in the dominant culture. Luke is 25. He's tall. He's, I think, handsome, very strapping, and but cognitively, he's not a 25-year-old. So, someone might want to engage him in a conversation, or, say we walk into a doctor's office or a dentist's office, and he gets handed a bunch of papers to sign. And if I'm not right there to say, hold on, I'm his guardian, I should be given those papers to fill out. Or if I'm not there to sort of support a conversation, I worry, right? I worry about, him getting frustrated. I worry about the other person judging him negatively. So that's one of the things that Basma and I think about is, how society views our children, one with more maybe obvious manifestations, and the other one with not. But, the minute he starts talking, you can tell he's not developmentally at his age. And so that's one thing we consider a difference. But, when we talk about society and how sort of important it is for people to have awareness and to be curious and to use empathy, it's an overlap to the work that we do as interculturalists.
Right.
And we feel that so much more work has to be done, and I think the sooner we can do that. I don't know, Basma, maybe there's a book in the waiting there, but we coach people to be comfortable with discomfort and to sit with ambiguity and to attend to judgment. But on a daily basis, in my personal life, I watch how this plays out. And I think there are no two more important people than people who work bridging cultures, whose worlds sort of collide, right, with you know, teaching inclusivity, but also, you know, wanting passionately for our children to feel included, and society at large to practice inclusion. One of the things that I used to lament was all of these social skills classes that we would put Luke in. And, you know, the premise was to teach him how to interact more functionally in the world. But the saddest thing is, like, the rest of the world doesn't, you know, like, there's no mandatory sort of training or, you know, how to be a good citizen, or how to, you know, how to be more inclusive to children, you know, that are different than you. I mean, I think schools are absolutely doing more of that. But I don't know. I'm, you know, this whole idea of, you know, children just sort of outing other kids that are different. It's still prevalent, you know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's something. I was just going to say, Valli, we have a lot of conversations about that together. And, you know, it's so interesting because being a parent of somebody who's neurodiverse and has a disability, you know, of course, anyone who's out there who's a parent, you dump your heart and soul into your kids, right? I mean, you'll do everything. You'll equip them with the resources to grow and develop and excel in whatever ways. And if your child has a disability, you know, you put money into whatever you need. Occupational therapy, speech therapy, horse therapy, you know, I mean, all these different opportunities. And at one point it hit me, here we were, like, you know, John and I putting everything into our kid, preparing him for the world. And then I thought, isn't it interesting? I'm putting all my advocacy energy into my kid to fit him into this world out there. What am I doing to prepare the world for my kid? Right? And when we think of a truly inclusive space, it's really about having that, having everyone learn and grow. I think the statistic, there it is. Thank you, Brett. He just read my mind. You know, I think, Valli, is it something like 15%? 1 in 20, 1 in 15 or so?
Now it's 15%. Over 1.5 billion people have disabilities in the world.
And so to me, like, to us, that means that every day that gives 15 or 20 kids or people around them who work with them, live by them, a chance to practice empathy, inclusion, develop these skills that are so, gosh, could we think of a time in the world where those skills are more important than right now? And, you know, in the traditional, like, disability world, we've really shifted. Valli and I did a presentation a few years ago where we held a whole chart of, I think, 7 or 8 models, kind of the chronology of how we have conceptualized different abilities or disabilities. And, you know, the basic one that many people might be able to relate to is a shift from a medical model, which looks at the person with the disability as somebody who needs to be fixed. They have a diagnosis. You need to do whatever you need to do to that person to fix them. And so this medical model is all about, you know, the pathology of that person. And the real thing we need to be thinking about is interculturalism. The thing that strikes me so much, I've spent my whole life in this field, is we actually need a social model, right? Where it's about the environmental factors, the thing we just talked about, where it's not about, you know, my kid has a diagnosis, and so we can work with that. And also, what are all these environmental factors that are in the way? You know, it relates to the idea in the architectural world that came up around universal design, which is so interesting from an interculturalist perspective, right? Because this idea of universal design, the classic example it's often given is curb cutouts, right? Like, who do we make curb cutouts for? Well, initially it's to make access for people in wheelchairs, right? Or people with walkers. But 95% of the time, the people using the curb cutouts where I live here in Minneapolis are people wheeling their luggage to the light rail station, or people pushing a stroller, or somebody pulling a grocery cart. It's not people in wheelchair that I see on a regular basis using this. So everyone benefits when the space around them is designed for everyone. And that's kind of the idea of this universal design. There's an image, Brett, I think in the first slide that kind of, there's a bunch of images, but this one is the simplest way, I think, for folks to conceptualize that idea of access.
And I want to really jump on that, what you just said, Basma. Thank you, because there seems to be, some people seem to be misguided by the notion that if we make allowances for something that doesn't fit the mold, we're taking away something from everyone else. And the opposite is true. We're creating more variety, more choice, more flexibility for everyone. So thank you. So what do we see here?
Yeah, so what we see, I'd love for people to jump in the chat and tell me what they see. You know, which kind of world do you want to live in? You want to live in a space that allows for all the yellow and purple people to be just as comfortable, or do you want to live in a space that's limiting to some people, where then none of us get the full benefit of everything everyone has to offer? There's a great new image. I don't have it in this particular presentation. I just remembered it now. It was actually a brilliant new design of a staircase built around ramps. So they started from the idea of a ramp, and the stairs, it's artistic, but it's actually stairs in a museum somewhere. And the whole idea is, instead of like, let's add a ramp on the side as an afterthought, the ramp is actually the central figure, and the steps kind of go around it. And it's just such a beautiful image of what, what's possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to express something that I noticed when both of you were speaking, Valli and Basma. It appears that in our profession, in our intercultural world, we teach our clients that assumptions are the termite of healthy relationships, and that when we assume, we make asses out of you and me, and all these things that have been repeated multiple times over, and yet it's so hard to suspend the assumption for most of us, because that's the bias filters, the programs that we automatically run. And I would suspect that with you being parents of two uniquely different children, one is, as you said, Basma, there's a physical expression. There we see the ramp and the stairs built around it. Beautiful. So
somehow I knew Brett would find it. If I mentioned it, I knew he would dig it up. Thanks,
yeah,
Brett.
we call him Mr. Google.
He's amazing.
We keep him around. So when you encounter somebody with trisomy 21, then it's easy to jump to a conclusion as, oh yes, I'm dealing with a down person, right? And ergo, as you explained, no, my child isn't always happy. He is Mr. Sunshine, but he's not always sunshiny. Maybe he's especially sunshiny when he's got a brother who reads a color-coded book with him, as I learned over the weekend via social media posts.
So stalking me on Facebook.
Yeah. No, hey, I check out our guests. Also, I have this very strong memory. My wife owns a Montessori school. She started and founded it and built it from 3 kids to now, I don't know, 130 kids. And she's been, I think, starting in year 3 or so, she was partnering with a local school of differability young adults. And there was always one lady that worked for my wife's school for years. She's a Down individual, and she's the exact opposite of what most people assume when they first see somebody with Down syndrome. So she's appears to be a very grumpy, almost aggressive type of individual who is the kindest person you'll meet on the planet when it comes to the kids and taking care of the little ones in the nursery. but dare an adult breach that veil of security, then her total physique, her physiology, her body language shifted completely. And having that opportunity for kids from diaper age to, I think now they go up to 6th grade, to be exposed on a daily to fellow students with different abilities, but also to staff that have a responsibility in the facility with different abilities and different cognitive skills. That is the beauty of what you described on that slide, 1 in 20, right? Every 20 kids every day have an opportunity to see this as quote unquote normal, as the real life, right? And unless we, at least that's been the learning that I took from this, unless we stop artificially separating these worlds that should go together, the stereotypes, the biases, filters won't go away, right? Am I off here, or is that something you would support as a parent?
You're absolutely right. Look, I mean, we see the need to label and to put things into categories, and here's a fancy word, taxonomies, all the time in our lives, right? And in our professions. We use constructs as a starting point for discussions, and it helps us understand things so that we can then have an expanded conversation. If the discussion stops right at the beginning of an initial assessment and then sort of a stereotype or expanded generalization, then we do so much damage, and we obviate any possibility of understanding the person who's a unique individual. You know, and I don't know if I mentioned before what Luke's differability is, but he's on the autism spectrum. And I mean, you know, there are unfortunately, media has created awareness about autism, right? But also there are stereotypes, you know, that, you know, if you're autistic, then you're a savant, or you have some particular genius, right? Or, you know, you can be a doctor on TV. And I mean, it's wonderful that we have these shows. And at the same time, it creates sort of a narrow narrowing of the lens. And what I want is to open up the aperture, right? So that we can acknowledge that that's just one aspect of what, you know, autism is. You know, my child, I mean, I put no limitations on him, and I would want society to do the same thing. He's beautiful and brilliant in so many ways, right? And he's uniquely different than someone else who is on the autism spectrum.
Which of these shows that you were alluding to would you say paint the most realistic picture? Are any of them close to your lives?
I like what's it called, Atypical on Netflix.
Yeah,
I really like that a lot.
Yeah, we watched that. Yeah.
And Brett, you had suggested a while ago that I should watch Love on the Spectrum. Yeah. And oh my God, it was just so entertaining and so touching. And I mean, it's not a show. These are not actors and actresses. No. Or actors in general. These are real life people talking about their desire to have relationships, and that was beautiful.
Yeah, it was, and it's an Australian show. I was rather proud of it because it came from my country. But the thing is that when I suggested to people, and I suggested to everybody, I suggest it as a model for challenging assumptions, right? And this is the work we do, right? And we have two wonderful people here who probably do the work at the highest level because of this viewer experience. But I would say that for me, it's a great insight into questioning your own assumptions and looking at something, because most people, when I say, you know, you could call this a reality show, right? And when you say that, that triggers, you know, Kardashians and all this kind of stuff. And this is not what this show is about. And I would, yes, Love on the Spectrum. It's a wonderful, because when I saw it, I thought, oh, I even had that preconception. I don't want this to be something that either, you know, makes fun or makes light of the subject and just assumes it's a perfect world and they pick the very bit. No, it's not about that. It's a very heartwarming, heartfelt, and I think probably the best you could probably approach a reality show if you were going to do it in that sense, right? It is true to life. It can't be anything else but true to life, with the wonderful diversity of the people that are represented and shown in their life experience, right? You can do it with people who so-called call themselves normal, because they can just make stuff up. To me, I think, you know, and I've been with both of your children, I think these are wonderful children. As you said, you're proud of them, but I just love watching them interact. They just come to the world as they are, you know. And this is, you know, this is just I don't know, it's just something I've observed, whether that's right or not. I mean, I just think that it is, and I've again, not having, as Christian said at the start, I had come to this with just a bunch of curiosity, bunch of, you know, ignorance, and of course that kind of informs, I guess, you know, I try and practice what I practice in the work, right? In a kind of saying, just like you, Valli, there are invisible immigrants. There are people that look and sound like you, Basma. You said you could look like the dominant culture, and yet, you know, you can open your mouth. You speak Arabic. You've got this wonderful background. All these kind of backgrounds that people don't have, but other people that are physically different, we put assumptions on, and we put preconceptions, and we, you know. So I think I think this topic is just I think this is a good starting topic for people to challenge their own assumptions, and then say, well, why don't you, you know, they might want to be, and I'm sorry, I'm ranting here a little bit. I can tell myself doing this, but what I'm trying to say is, I know, reel it in. But no, it's important to me, because I think people might say, well, I couldn't possibly, I've got to be very careful. I can't be offensive when I'm talking to somebody, a parent of a child with different abilities. But then, you know, if they can really test their assumptions in that realm, then you can challenge them if they go off the rails a little bit when they challenge it, when they put assumptions on people from different cultural backgrounds or races or ethnicities. I hope I rounded that out.
I don't think it was a rant. I think it was a valid contribution, and I was only being facetious here. And I want to honor what Antimo says here. I think this is a great approach to this. I think it's rather than following preconceived designs that serve certain boxes or majority cultures, asking about the individual story, right? And this is something that society is probably, as a large group of people, struggle with by default, is to acknowledge the unique narratives of its members, because we often try to standardize and streamline and structure our processes in order to facilitate societal service delivery, checkbox, move on, keep going, nothing to see here. And it is a lot harder to address each and every one's individual story. So it is, I think design, as Basma rightfully said, it plays a critical role in this, because if our public spaces that serve us as a society, as a group of people, not individuals, if we design those in a way that they're most inclusive, or as inclusive as possible, then that will also steer behaviors and thought processes. So tough thing to do, but I think that would be something that I would wish more people like Valli and Murphy were, Valli and Basma were included in when it comes to, I don't know, urban design or design in general.
Yeah, and a couple things, you know, that have been said make me think about some strategies that are really easy to implement. So if I can mention those. First of all, I did want to say one of the best ways to learn about interacting with kids or people with different abilities is watching their siblings. Both Valli and I are blessed with children who would be considered neurotypical. And, you know, it is such a gift to watch my boys interact with each other. And I'm so thankful for what they're each contributing to one another. And when you were talking about the assumptions, you know, one of the things I was recalling for, I've been part of this Down Syndrome Achievement Center called Gigi's Playhouse here in the Twin Cities. And the 7 founding moms recently got together to reminisce as we had our anniversary gala. And, you know, one of the things I was remembering was, and this is sort of a funny thing, like I'm an educator every day. That's, you know, that's how we have a roof over our heads and food on the table. And with Jacob, we focused a lot on the skill development. And this is maybe typical of a first child too, right? You focused on these things. Well, he was reading at age 3, my child with Down syndrome. He was an early reader. I got a call from his kindergarten teacher that said she did testing on the kids, and Jacob was in a class with all typical kids, and he tested into the highest reading group as a kindergartner, you know, and this is still, and then we kind of forgot to teach our overly verbal, not our verbal delayed child. Jacob was verbally speech delayed, but forgot to teach the second kid to read. So he entered kindergarten, but his brother taught him to read. Like, you know, so my neurotypical kid learned to read. And so challenging those assumptions, watching how the boys interact, what they learn from each other. And when you ask Lucas, my younger child, you know, what are some things you've learned from Jacob? That's the one he'll say, well, he taught me to read. My older brother read to me and he taught me to read. And so challenging those assumptions, I think, is important. The one thing I wanted to say, you know, my work long before Jacob was born, John and I in our intercultural work sort of adopted this idea, normalized experience of difference, right? So just make people less freaked out to encounter somebody who's different, right? So if you show up to class and there's a person sitting next to you named Abdul, you don't have to go, whoa, like, or someone with a hijab, or, you know, like if you just normalize that experience. And what I've done as a trainer and teacher, I've gone through all my presentations and I've looked at all the images I've selected. And guess what? I found a bunch of images of random groups of people that do not represent the kind of world and the way that I teach. There's not anybody in a wheelchair. There are not, you know, the visual doesn't represent the kind of diversity I want to represent. So in these small ways, we are reinforcing things. When I tell people, if you're writing exam questions or examples for critical incidents, of course, in the intercultural world, we're often targeting certain cultures, but look at the names. I mean, if you take any publisher's set of exam questions, a lot of people use them right out of the publisher's database, right? You're going to find names like John, Mary, Joe, and Sarah. You're not going to find names like Heisuk and Jiyoung and Tomoko and Abdul and Marina, you know, and so we got to figure out ways to just in small little ways kind of expose folks to those levels of difference. And the other thing I'm going to say this because I know both of you, and I appreciate the learning approach with which you're approaching this conversation. One of the things I really want to emphasize is people first language. And this should be based on personal preference. Valli and I have also had conversations about this. If people look at my child and they say, oh, he's a Downs kid, what they've done is they've defined him without knowing him based on his diagnosis, instead of saying, oh, you have a child with Down syndrome. And I'll say, yes, my child has Down syndrome along with 17 other amazing attributes. Let me tell you about the other parts of him that are really fascinating and interesting. And so I do know some people that do like to put a label before their name. I have some friends who prefer to refer to their children as my autistic daughter or my autistic son. So it is, of course, personal preference that they see that and they interpret that in a different way as a defining characteristic. But in general, if we can catch ourselves when we are using references and think about people first languages to at least catch ourselves so we can ask and find out how do people prefer to be referred to. I think that can go a long way. I always feel like kind of what Valli was saying earlier, immediately when somebody sees my kid, if they put the label first, they've already limited him and they've limited the possibilities for him. They're already making assumptions about him, even unintentionally, because they noticed that first. And so but it is also a personal preference thing. So I want people to be aware of that.
I have a question for you, and I'm not sure if this is my naivete or if there's some credence to this. The biases and stereotypes that society has around neurodiversity and differability are very much grown-up biases that are fully developed adult stereotypes. Because when our youngest daughter grew up in mommy's school, she went through the whole Montessori process from before she could walk. And there was a boy in her age group, in her cohort, also by the name of Luke, incidentally, who I don't even know what his differability is. I think he is diagnosed as autistic somehow, and I'm not a fan of those labels anyway, because I don't understand half of them, and it means different things to different people. And Luke is Luke, and Luke has some behavioral differences from the rest of his age group, and that made him sometimes a target, because the other kids who didn't understand what was going on would single him out and other him. And my daughter and very many of her friends became the majority in the group, which I found interesting just from a parent observing what's going on, that the majority of the kids, and this is age 4 or 5, right? The majority of the kids in the group would jump to protect Luke from the wannabe bullies or from the wannabe otherers. So the social group of 4 or 5-year-olds self-directed to circle wagons around one of them who didn't fit the mold of whatever perceived majority behavior would be like. So my question is, should we begin at a much earlier age with full immersion, all abilities, all neurodiverse, all the labels that you want to slap on them, put kids together the way they are, the way they show up, in order for them to build their own normalized world instead of that which adults hand down to them? Complex question, maybe, I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're asking two parents of neurodiverse children. Of course, we want nothing but acceptance for our children, and we want nothing more than an almost a utopian environment where they are relegated the same amount of respect and attention and consideration as neurotypical kids. That said, you know, and I think it's, what's that contact hypothesis theory? You don't just sort of throw different people together and hope for a spirit of kumbaya to happen. You need to create supportive structures so that the differences are understood and honored. So, and this does begin at a very young age with preschool, other preschool classmates or cousins, neighborhood children. You know, in an ideal world, a parent understands what might be a trigger of their child, and this sometimes it's moving targets, because our children, as they grow and develop, you know, what might be a trigger or a stressor at one point is outgrown, and then something new happens, and it just, we don't realize it until we're sort of in vivo, in the moment, right? But I think just to answer your question, of course, immersion should happen at a young age, along with supported guidance, parent to parent. You know, if I could do things differently, I'd go back and change. We used to we were friends with this couple that would have huge Super Bowl parties, and with a lot of people, a lot of noise. The kids would all hang out together. And I remember this one party. My little guy was, I don't know, he was about 18 months old. He wasn't quite 2 years old. And he cried from the minute we got there until when we had to leave, which was even before the game ended. He had such incredible sensory overload. And and it was heartbreaking now as I sort of replay that experience in my mind, that I went somewhere where I thought it would be a little bit more quiet, but there was noise everywhere, large screen TVs, you know, guys, you know, the dads sort of being sort of, you know, raucous and, you know, cheering their team on, and little kids running around, and he was taking this all in, and he didn't have the filter to process the sound, the visual stimuli, and I just feel like, you know, if I had known better, if I had figured things out more, A, maybe I wouldn't have put him in that situation, or B, I would have made the decision, or at least I would have asked my friends, you know, could we create a little bit of a quiet or safe space where I can go with him. I think, you know, parents being on top of what's going on with their children, and supporting other children to be inclusive is a place to begin this whole process of bringing our children into the fold of society. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I also respect that I might be kumbaya-ish in my approach, because I'm not a parent with a neurodiverse child, right? So I certainly understand that we need to have infrastructure in place, and well-educated, in the school situation, well-educated staff to be able to handle the differabilities of population in that environment. Yep, thank you for that.
And you're right, Christian, it's such a complex question, right? I mean, and that's the debate on the national, you know, international level as well, like what, you know, how much inclusion and what does inclusion mean? And at some point, some of the policies put in place are actually limiting. Like right now, there's a lot of action to, I don't know, maybe we don't want to get into all this, but just in terms of even the legalities around opportunities to work and what that means for benefits and all those things. There's a bunch of layers to that. The thing I will say is that, you know, what I sort of joke about is that extra copy of the chromosome, in the parents it manifests, and I think Valli would agree. I mean, your example with Lucas is probably quite typical, right? Is that it manifests as detective skills, right? So whatever that neurodiverse thing is, like we have this extra, honestly, every single day is an opportunity to do some detective work. And if we can, whether we're working with adults or observing children, if we can always keep in mind that all behavior is communication, all behavior is connected to something going on. In this case with Luke, probably sensory overload. That how would you know that with an 18-month-old? You know, in the case of a kid acting out at school, in the case of someone in the training room, you know, an adult with ADHD who you might not realize needs to be there fidgeting or they can't focus. It looks like lack of focus to you, but it is focus to them. So, you know, if we just always remember that all behavior is communicating something, and it's our job, especially as trainers and teachers and consultants and coaches, it's our job to become more skilled at figuring out what is that behavior communicating, what am I learning from this moment, and really approaching every situation as a learning moment. I think we can all agree, all of us have children on this session right here. I mean, our children are our greatest teachers and our greatest window to the world, right? And so figuring out what am I supposed to be learning in this moment that's so incredibly frustrating, that I've been struggling with for an hour. Like what am I missing? What is it? And so I credit Jacob with, I already was known as a pretty creative child. My mother will tell you, like, you know, that I kind of always did things my own way, little bit off, you know, from what she expected or what was typical. But the creativity skills are definitely enhanced by trying to figure out how to raise our kids.
You cook a hell of a baklava, I hear, too.
Oh, wait. Where's my invite? I'm right there.
We're going to have a cook-off, though, next time we see each other.
Yeah, you know, my my Greek sister here and I, the Egyptians and the Greeks, we go way back in that whole debate about who invented baklava.
I was gonna start this whole conversation.
I'll settle this for you. It was the Lebanese. No, I'm curious because you brought this up. So now we're talking about different parts of the world. Now, much of the conversation we just had is probably around the status we find in the society in which the four of us live and in which the four of us raise our children. Now, have you, with your travels and with your work, have you recognized that the neurodiversity and differability of your children is being perceived and treated and interacted with in different ways in different parts of the world?
When are we scheduling the next session?
That is
a whole big topic you just brought up there, Christian. It's so true, the cultural layers. Go ahead, Valli.
Yeah, no, I absolutely wanted to underscore what you said. I mean, differability, let's just call it disability, is viewed so differently cross-culturally, right? And you know, if you look at it on a spectrum, you have acceptance and integration on one end and absolute denial and stigmatization on another. It would be so interesting to see. I don't know, Basma, have you ever seen any scientific data on specific different countries? I mean, I can make somewhat of an aggregate global generalization and tell you that in more Asian countries, disability tends to be more stigmatizing to a family than in Western countries, in Northern European countries, in North America. Okay. That's globally generalizing, but I think it's based on my anecdotal experience, coaching, teaching, facilitating, and actually just doing the research. What do you say, Basma?
Yeah, it's a huge topic, and there's so many different categories of differability too, right? So I mean, I think for just a minute about the advocacy in this country around destigmatizing mental health in the past few years. I mean, I teach college students. You can't tell me there hasn't been an increase of diagnosing a lot of different mental health concerns over. I mean, there is definitely, but there are a lot more student clubs and a lot more efforts to destigmatize things around mental, and that's a whole, that's a whole nother category, right? So it depends really what we're talking about. I mean, even thinking about cultures where there's a spiritual explanation for something that, that happened, and thinking about some native cultures that talk about two-spirit people, or talk about, when a child is born with a differability, it might be, it's actually a gift, right? And so, yes, it's a huge, huge topic. It's something I'd love to explore more. I don't have a lot of personal experience in researching it, but definitely. And I'm very aware that, we were living in Egypt when Jacob was born. I think our lives would look a little different. Well, they would anyway. The food would be really, really good. But the opportunities for my child to be integrated in the ways he is would look different. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yep. And in some countries, it's a manifestation of something you might have done wrong in a previous life, right? So now you have to redo it. You have to redo your time in the physical realm. Versus
Amanda here describes what it's like in Botswana, where I guess she is currently, or maybe she is always there. I don't know.
No, Amanda is actually normally here, but she has been in Botswana, I think, for almost a year now. So back in Botswana, it's a whole different story. But
yeah. Oh, I know,
yeah.
Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda. Yeah, we are Amanda. Yes. Yeah.
That's fascinating, right? So this is one example of how.
So Africa, similar to the story, or at least in Botswana, similar to your experience with more fatalistic other societies. I think whenever we have higher powers, spirits, religion, deities, having a strong influence over humans decision making, where we delegate authority to a higher power, I think it might be easier to then view differability as something that was brought upon from the higher power, because it's different from the rest of the village, the city, the town, the state. So maybe that has something to do with it. I'm just going out on a limb here.
What's that human desire to want put a reason around something, right?
Right.
What is the reason? I don't know. I mean, and as parents, how, I mean, obviously that's a question maybe you asked yourself. Maybe, why is this happening? People, for all types of things that happen to them, say, why is this happening to me? Why have I been blessed with this? I don't know. What's your answer to that?
You asking me?
No. I mean, I'm asking Basma or Valli. That desire to ask a question. Was it a question? I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just, this is what I've been blessed with. In terms of that, I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of people that I know, and a lot of people that have written who are parents of children with Down syndrome in particular. That's a lot of what I can relate to in the differability world. They talk about, well, first you go through this grieving process for this kid you didn't have, right? And then you come to accept, sort of like the natural cycle. And I never went through that, to be honest. I'm so happy to have a kid, and to be pregnant. And so to me, like, I just have always adopted things happen. There's a purpose for everything. Things happen for a reason. There aren't really coincidences in this world. And so I just am constantly asking for both my children, what is this moment teaching me? I mean, right now, we were up half hour past bedtime last night with the 7-year-old designing leprechaun traps. I mean, that, the reality of sort of the day-to-day life of, like, last year we thought the leprechaun, because St. Patrick's Day is coming up, wouldn't, like, if we just captured him under a plastic cup, he'd be captured, right? Now there's some thinking about, well, the leprechaun can escape. We really need some weights and some sticky, I mean, it's getting pretty complicated over. So I'm, as I was kind of trying to get my kid out of the art room in the basement upstairs, I thought, okay, what is this moment teaching me, right? I mean, I think, so for me, it was just, I really think too, in the Egyptian community here in the Twin Cities, Jacob is the only child with Down syndrome. And I very much have thought often, like, wow, he was sent here to teach a lot of people who haven't had the cultural exposure, maybe on a wider scale, at least the older generation of Egyptians here, maybe not the younger, but who really haven't had as much opportunity to interact with people as just like him to have that opportunity. So yeah, I didn't experience the, why is this happening to me? I know that wasn't the context in which you're saying it, but I'm always looking for meaning, I guess, in everything in general. That's part of my personality. So.
Yeah, but you're looking for a meaning in the teachable moment, not the not the origin of the trying to solve a problem. It's not a. But I think my comment was more, people often as humans, no matter what it is, we try and reason with why it's happened and that kind of thing. And so what Christian was saying, I guess, is valid. There are a lot of faith practices that offer that, when it really, you're just kind of asked to carry it on in faith. You're carrying on the teachable moments in faith, which is, I think it's a great way to approach it. I think,
Well, Brett, if you're going to pull me into a confessional moment, the honest truth is, I'm pretty sure God thinks I needed to develop more patience. And that's why he sent me the 2 kids he did. I'm
Basma,
learning.
You should know you don't confess anything to Brett. Don't do that. He's just he's going to remember all of it.
And because we're going to a global audience, there are millions of people watching this, and you must. No, this is great, and so I want to bring up, and I've been kind of in amongst your slides. I've been looking at this one. I'm going to bring this up. They make it a little complicated to share a screen on this application. We've got to write to these people. But I think this is wonderful. Now, shall I ask one of you to read this, or can I read it? I don't know what is best. I'm not sure I'd get through it, but it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful description for me. I don't know. Would you like to read it? I'd love to hear it. because we might turn this into a podcast one time. somebody might not be able to see the screen. What would be your? Would you like to read it?
Do you want to read it, Valli?
Sure.
Or do you want me to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay.
You're now in a secret world. You'll see things you never imagined. Ignorance, rudeness, and discrimination. But you'll also witness so many everyday miracles, and you'll know it. You won't think a milestone is just a milestone. You'll know it's a miracle and be present in that moment. You'll treasure things most wouldn't think twice about. You'll become an advocate, an educator, a specialist, and a therapist. But most of all, you'll be a mom to the most wonderful child. And that's Geraldine Renton. I love the mighty. I love the mighty.
What
Listen,
is the mighty? Educate us. What's the mighty?
yeah, it's an online community for people who have or are allies or are just curious about issues of differability and mental health.
Great. Excellent.
Great.
That's a wonderful quote and a wonderful reminder of how we're all fab normal. That's many years ago. None of us are normal. We're all weird, but we're also fantastic. So we're all fab normal. That's a term that entered our family vernacular.
Is it fat normal? Is that what it is?
Fab, as in fabulous.
Fab normal. I was going to say, I said fat
A
normal.
B, not a T, right? B.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Normal. You want me to spell it out so we can enter it here?
Sometimes, you know me. Sometimes you have to. That is just me.
Oh man, it is something with you, man.
Well,
Here.
it's been an hour. It's been
Fab
an hour.
normal.
This is amazing. Fab normal. Wonderful. Got it. Perfect. Well, it's been an hour, and we could probably go on for much longer. I'm just honored and blessed and touched. We both are to have you here. And this should be probably a bigger conversation. But anyone who's out there wants to learn more, engage with these two wonderful ladies. They are on social media. Of course, everybody is. That's anybody, including us. That means that I'm sure they will be happy to answer any of your questions, any of your inquiries, and put you in touch with maybe the mighty. I mean, this I haven't heard of it before. I think I'll go there if you mention that allies or people who want to learn, that might be a good spot for people to go to look that up. And yeah, so I mean, it's just been wonderful to have you, as I knew it would be. And yeah, it's great. I was going to say at the start of this episode, if you want engaging conversations, you put an Egyptian and a Greek in the room, and there's going to be some conversation thrown around.
Plus, this was the shortest hour broadcast I've ever had. This didn't feel like an hour. This was amazing. No. Thank you, ladies.
It's been wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you. This was so fun. It was really, really fun to be together. And I also just want to say, I really appreciate your attention to this topic. And, I know that a lot of times your sessions are, and I was having it in my head, like, make sure you're applying this to the teaching and training audience. And, hopefully there were some transferable things, but really when Valli and I get together, a lot of it is just, we tell the stories of our experience, and a lot of it, hopefully there are some things that people can take away for their work, but also it's fun to just connect around the stories and the lived experiences.
Absolutely. And that's our presentation. Our last presentation was that. We began by saying, we're here to just sort of begin a conversation, but also just to raise your own compass and awareness.
Yeah. And I think it was one of the first CTAR conferences where we presented on this, where it was, all of you that go to conferences, it was the last conference day, the last session at 3:30 in the afternoon. It was in an impossible to find location, like in the adjoining hotel in the basement corner. Remember this, Valli? And we're like, who's going to come? And 5 people came, all parents of kids with different abilities. And it actually, we just sat around and shared stories. I mean, Valli and I had like 49 slides, and I think we showed a few, but really it was finding each other was so helpful. And I think that's something so many people in this audience can relate to. When you find the people who understand your lived experience as an expat or third culture kid, or whatever it is. There's a natural connection there, and
Absolutely.
so it's fun to get together and share that with a wider group as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being available at the same time in 2 different locations. This is, those of you in live television, you have no idea how hard it is to pull this off, and Brett did it. All right.
I mean, this is why we have a team of producers housed in the 2 Chaps Tower that is currently under renovations again. A huge team of people in the background. We just couldn't possibly listen, so we're not going to. That's why how this magic happens.
Thank you, everybody. 2 Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 166. We're out for today, but stay tuned. There's more coming for the rest of the week. Ciao for now.
See you guys. Bye.